Hey, it's Drybear. We're continuing to work on leveling builds for the warrior, as my audience had asked for a lot of early to mid-game leveling builds rather than working on less builds but more hyper-polished end-game Atlas-focused builds in the game. So that's what we're working on right now. And today is a Totemic leveling build for the warrior, and is actually probably one of my favorite builds so far. It is incredibly chill. You actually don't need much gear for it. You don't even need to pay attention that much. A lot of the combos here are very straightforward and easy. Now again, this isn't going to be as fast as, say, like a sorceress leveling build, a mercenary leveling build, or even the top one, like the highest possible ranger build, but I would argue that most of the warrior leveling builds are not going to be as fast as any of those anyways. But what's great about this build is that not only are you using totems, which are very accessible in the warrior part of the skill tree, there are many nodes that you can pick up for totems related as well. You can also get tons of combinations, especially once you get the Warbringer Ascendancy online. You start summoning these ancestral spirits that all have different effects and scale off your totem as well. And it gives you a whole bunch of defense as well, as the totems will pull aggro. On top of that, you can just add a bunch of AoE damage and wear a shield, because the totems themselves in Path of Exile 2 only count as weapons themselves. They don't actually scale with your weapon, which means that you don't need to have the perfect weapon equipped for this build if you're just going to be doing totems. Now, we're going to be using the Shockwave totem here, which just on a very long charge does a big AoE shockwave. It actually does really good damage if you build into totems. There's a bunch of totem damage that we can get in the early part of the tree, which does great damage. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to throw overpower on it, so it does a bunch of stun buildup as well. And then we're just going to run Bone Shatter. So all you have to do for this, very simply, is put down the Shockwave totem. On first hit, it should do plenty of stun buildup to cause them to be primed for stun. That's where you see that dot appear on them. That's when Bone Shatter is ready. You hit him with Bone Shatter, and with the support gems we're running on Bone Shatter, you can just instantly kill everything. But again, you just put the totem down, it hits, you Bone Shatter, you go to the next pack. Bone Shatter, go to the next pack. And it's actually quite good for bosses too, because you can have so much defense from the shield, from your armor building up on top of everything, that you're very safe while doing it. This is actually one of the smoothest, most laid-back leveling experiences I've had. We did, you know, like days and days of mercenary leveling. We've done a bunch of warrior leveling, and so far this one has been the most relaxing that I've had. It's just very chill. Now what's cool about this is you get to like spec into Warbringer for the ancestral spirits, which give you a whole bunch of different bonuses depending on which spirit you get. And one thing to think about as well is that there are 2 ballistas that you can get from mercenary by having a crossbow on your back, and both of them actually count as totems. Now what we're going to be doing with the ballista, we're going to be taking the Ripwire ballista from the mercenary tree, the crossbow ability, and what this is it counts as a totem. Unfortunately, since we're building for melee damage on the Shockwave totem and the Ripwire ballista is a projectile, we will still get totem damage on the Ripwire ballista, but all of our melee damage will only go to the Shockwave totem, which is fine for leveling. And what we're going to be using the ballista for is it actually has a natural buildup of pin, and when you pin a target, they become immobilized. And the warrior tree actually has the ability to add like 120% damage when you're hitting a target that's immobilized. So if your Ripwire ballista immobilizes them, you can deal insane damage to them. And also, one thing that you need to know about Path of Exile 2 is that when a target is staggered, which means you build up that stun buildup and you heavy stun them, which is like a Dark Souls stagger, and they go to the ground, they are considered immobilized for that period, which means you get bonus damage when they're staggered as well, which gives you a great combo. There's also little trick that I discovered, that when you run overabundance on the Ripwire ballista, so say you have a max totem count of 2 on your Shockwave totem, if you put overabundance on your Ripwire ballista, you can actually put down 2 of your Shockwave totems, and because Ripwire has overabundance on it, you can have 3 totems while still having your 2 Shockwave very easily without lowering the duration of your normal Shockwave. Of course, I have a very simple sheet here that shows all the abilities you want to put together. Once you finally unlock your Warbringer Ascendancy, you will actually gain a new ability called Ancestral Spirits, which can have support gems placed into it, and you'll get this once you get through Act 2 and you get through your Trial of Secumus for the first time. You'll be able to lock that in, which is really awesome. And then you're going to go through and get this really early. I would recommend getting the melee damage at the beginning of the tree, but we'll go through that once we go through the talent tree itself. Additionally, I have rebuilt this build onto Mobalytics, so I'll leave a link for that down below with the build sheet as well. Be sure to just hit a favorite on it if you enjoy it. And this just has kind of the basic setup for stats, the abilities you'll want to use, and then the full talent tree with the ascendancy as well. And this one I put a little bit further points into it just so you can see where you would want to go if you were pushing, to the end of Cruel and Beyond with that. But this one is just a very simple, easy leveling build. So let's talk a little bit about how it functions. It's very simple and straightforward. Since we have the shield, you can always block if you need to, but your main focus is going to be using totems for damage and for stun buildup so you can detonate with Bone Shatter. So you'll be placing down the Shockwave totem, you place it down, and this one, after a while, will explode in a big AoE, doing a bunch of damage. Now, when you first start leveling, you actually will have a little less damage on your Shockwave, and so for that reason, I like running Brutality as a early pickup. It just gives you 35% more physical damage on the Shockwave, and it makes it a little bit more consistently killing small targets and doing AoE. And then we're also going to run Overpower on it as well to make sure it does as much stun buildup as possible so that you put the Shockwave totem down, it's going to hit the target, they're going to become primed for stun most of the time, usually in one hit, and then all you have to do is just use your Bone Shatter to break them and do the AoE. For Bone Shatter, one of my favorite combos for Bone Shatter when you're first leveling is to run Impact Shockwave, which gives you an aftershock on a heavy stun, which on a skill that always heavy stuns is going to be really cool. And then you also get more damage against targets that are low on life. In my experience, most of the time, unless it's a boss, if you're hitting a target with Bone Shatter to prime them for stun into a heavy stun, they're going to be on low life anyways, which means that you'll be able to get extra value out of this. And these two together usually means that a single Bone Shatter is all that's needed to clear out an entire pack. You put down one Shockwave, it hits them once, gets the build up, and you detonate for the Bone Shatter, go to the next pack, and you're good to go. Now let me show you what I'm talking about with the Ripwire Ballista. So for this, you will have to have a crossbow in your offhand as your secondary, as this is a mercenary skill, but you can unlock this once you have the gem level required to get it. And this is it is a ballista that you'll put down, but it does count as a totem, which means that all of your totem benefits will work. It'll summon ancestral spirits. It'll benefit from totem resistances, totem health, as well as totem damage. All of that applies to it. Like I said, the only thing is that the Shockwave totem is a melee effect, and the Ripwire Ballista is a projectile effect. So all the melee effects we're going to get in the warrior tree are not going to apply, but we don't really need that as much. But the trick I'm talking about is if we go to Shockwave totem, right now, at least on screen, we have 2 as our totem limit, which means if I go 1 Shockwave totem, 2 Shockwave totem, if I put a 3rd Shockwave down, you'll notice that the first Shockwave I put down goes down because I can only have 2 Shockwave totems. Now, what I tried at first is I tried running Overabundance on Shockwave totem. This gives it +1 limit, but cuts the duration in half. And personally, I found it kind of cumbersome to have a half duration on the totems here. They start at 12. These Shockwaves going to 6 seconds just felt like, especially on bosses, it was just kind of annoying to constantly be doing this without being able to play with other abilities, and it costs a lot more mana to do as well. However, there's a trick that's kind of interesting. I don't know if this is intended or not, but you can actually put Overabundance on another totem. So in this case, we have Ripwire Ballista. It has a max totem normally of 2, because my global totem limit is 2. My character's totem limit is 2. But if I put Overabundance on this Ripwire Ballista, it can be my 3rd totem without affecting my Shockwave. So normally I can only have 2 Shockwaves, but if my 3rd totem has Overabundance, it can be my 3rd. As long as it's one of the 3, I can have 3 up at once. And this is plenty, because you have 2 Shockwaves. Like if you have a boss, you put 2 Shockwaves down and then put the Ballista down. The reason we like getting the Ballista is not only does it give us good range damage, you can even run with things like Envenom on this early on to get some extra poison if you'd like, just to get some damage on the target. But it does do pin buildup, and it gives you Immobilize, which gives us some really big bonuses later on. Then aside from that, you have your blocks. You can raise your shield for defense if you need it. You can use Bone Shattered if anything is close to target. And if you get the opportunity, which you will pretty much only on bosses, you can use Mace Strike or Earthquake. The reason I don't run Earthquake here, the original idea was that if you run Earthquake, like if you Earthquake into a Shockwave, the Shockwave causes the Earthquake to explode, which is a nice little like cleanup there. It actually makes a cool combination. And I was hoping that was going to be a good leveling build. The problem is Earthquake by itself costs so much mana, and it's so unbelievably slow, even with a Shockwave totem, that it ended up becoming more of a problem. And also one thing to think about as well, and a critique I have for Warrior, is there aren't very many ways ways to improve your mana consumption in the talent tree for warrior. They have ways to convert like mana costs into life costs and then get life regeneration in this area here, and lower mana costs of these as well, which is decent, but it's not super great. Most of the other classes have ways to get mana back or improve mana recovery. Warriors don't really. You could get, you can get mana regeneration on your accessories and things like that, but you're really heavily relying on your flask, and it felt very cumbersome, and I honestly did not enjoy it very much trying to level with Earthquake into Shockwave Totem. So pretty much what I found myself doing is that if there was a single target that was living too long, like a boss, I would just, throw out 2 Earthquakes and start swinging my mace and trying to build stun buildup. An easy trick you can run for this if you're running Bone Shatter is you can actually take Mace Strike and put Ruthless on it. Every 5th swing, which happens very quickly, will have 500% stun buildup, which gets you closer to being able to Bone Shatter, which is your best ability anyway, so you'll be able to build it up that way. Now let's talk about the talent tree for the build. What I would recommend doing is not going for the defense here, because you're going to be running a shield and your totems are going to be pulling aggro anyways, so I would get the melee damage here. So melee damage all the way through to this spot here. This gives you a nice boost of 10 strength at the beginning as well, plus more stun buildup. And one thing you'll notice as well is this does affect your totems, because your Shockwave Totem is a melee skill. So your Mace Strike, your Bone Shatter, and your Shockwave Totem are all melee. So global melee damage that's unrelated to weapon will apply to all of them. So this gives you a nice big bonus of damage early on. Then we're going to get more melee damage damage against stunned enemies. So when we stagger with the Bone Shatter, we get more damage as well, plus melee damage and then strength. And then what I recommend doing is coming straight over here. I found that if I'm going to go Ripwire Ballista, I needed to get dexterity here, get some strength, and come down into the totem area of the tree. When I was first leveling this, I skipped the totem placement and the elemental resistance here, but I did pick up the damage, so you get more totem damage and life along through here, but I wanted to get to the +1 max limit as fast as possible, so I skipped these. It means that your totems place slower, but it does give you more damage and gets you out of here faster. So you come over here, you grab strength all the way there, grab some more dexterity if you need it, grab a jewel, preferably one that has totem damage on it, and then come down here. And the main reason for that is you can get more totem damage, but then you get a +1 maximum to summon totems. So this talent by itself gives you 2 maximum totems by default, which means unmodified, your Shockwave will go to 2 totems instead of 1. Nice big increase on single target, which gives you some bonus there. Grab the totem damage and then come down here, and again, if you get another jewel that has totem damage on it, that's excellent as well. Then we're going to skedaddle down to the bottom, because if you come up here and grab totem damage, you get another +1s. This means you can have 3 Shockwave totems and a Ripwire Ballista up at one time, which gives you crazy single target burst and good spread on AoE targets as well. From there, this is like about when you're going to start getting towards like the middle of Act 3, then you want to start working your way back up here. The reason for that is these nodes here, if you go from this over here, this gives you more melee damage, more melee damage, more melee damage. We know this affects your Bone Shatter as well as your Shockwave Totem. However, we get this right here, more melee damage against immobilized targets. This is 20%, 40%, 90% melee damage against targets that are immobilized, so either heavy stunned or pinned down by our Ripwire Ballista. Huge burst potential. You don't really need this on the mobs, because your Shockwaves are going to kill them all anyway. Shockwave plus Bone Shatter should kill all normal mobs, but against big targets like bosses, you'll be immobilizing them with the pin from the Ripwire Ballista to get bonus damage, and then when they build up enough stun, you'll force them to heavy stun and then get more damage again as well, and it helps you a lot with bursting down bosses quickly. Now from here, if you're moving towards the end of Cruel, you have a couple options that you can pick up as well. Right here at the very beginning, coming out of here, you can actually go straight up and there's another set of totem nodes. So you can grab like totem placement speed, there's some damage in here as well, which is really nice and clean, and it's right next to you, which is really cool. If you find you're having mana issues, you can grab these conversions, just make sure you have enough life regeneration to make up for that. However, one thing I would recommend playing around with as well is attack speed, because anything that's just global attack speed will apply to your totems as well as you, so it'll make the Ballista and the Shockwave totems better, and especially once you get the Ancestral Warrior totem up, it's going to help a good bit with that. There is some attack speed here and some attack speed here. You can even find some down here if you wanted to get it. However, there's one node that I haven't had a chance to test because it's going to be pure endgame, and that's going to be over here on the Druid/Templar side of the tree at the very top. If you come all the way up here, so from On the warrior/marauder side, if you go up to this side here, you'll have another set of totem nodes down here. But there's also a node that says unlimited number of totems, and totems reserve 100 spirit each, which means that if you had a full spirit build, you could potentially very easily exceed the totem account that you would normally get through the other talent bonuses. So this would be a really fun build for endgame if you're looking for a general direction to move in if you wanted to keep doing totems. Then for Ascendancy, I strongly recommend going Warbringer just because it does have more synergy with totems. When you unlock this, you'll get totem life and then you'll get ancestral spirits. Then you'll be able to get more totem life and also split damage with your totems as well. And there's a couple other things that are worthwhile getting in here. If you wanted to go into the block area, you could to become even more tanky, but this is going to be more of like an end game choice. Like once you finish Act 3, you probably just want to finish this for your first 4 Ascendancy points, and then you want to work towards other options here depending on what you want to go into for your end game build, or if you just want to transition off this leveling build into a true end game build. And the other thing I want to talk about a little bit, aside from the actual like ancestral warrior totem, which you'll get at level 51 plus in Cruel, is just the kinds of ancestral spirits you'll get from the Warbringer Ascendancy. So when you summon any totem, you will randomly get one of the ancestral spirits. The big turtle here, big turtle friend, I love this guy. He does abysmal damage. He bites like he's eating a piece of lettuce and it's abysmal. But what he does do is he provides you with an aura that gives 50% increased defenses and block, which means that you're super tanky while doing it. Horn Guy will give you a nice little buff here, which gives you 5 rage on hit with attacks. The rage stacks will give you extra damage, which is super nice. And then it'll just turn into a club man and start beating people. The female character is going to be, or I guess the gorilla next. Gorilla does great damage. He has a charge attack and a leap slam attack, does tons of AoE damage and good stun build up as well. And then it should cycle to the last one now. Yeah, the female. She has a root attack and large AoE as well. So you kind of can play around this if you're going against a boss. You may be able to bring out the turtle if you'd like. It is pure random, so depending on which ones you get, and they are tied to the totem as well. So if the totem dies, the ancestral spirit will die, but they all have different effects and bonuses. And if you get like, you know, double gorilla in a big AoE pack, it's super strong. I like getting the caster shaman girl here on bosses. And if you're in danger, having the turtle out is also nice. So you can also do things like summoning the horn guy, and then when he gives you a buff, summon a new totem to get a new guy. So now the buff is still rolling right now, but then I'm still dealing with, I have a gorilla and the shaman caster. So there's some options there that are really cool. And they do also get their own skill here that you can put support gems on. There's actually a wide variety of things you can do with this as far as ancestral spirits. You can make them tankier. There's even a possibility of doing the combustible where they explode when they die, which gives you more damage bonus on that and more AoE, but you'll have to experiment a lot with that with endgame, I think. For leveling, it doesn't really matter which one you get. They're all going to be useful for you. That's what I've got for the totem leveling build. Again, not as fast as some of the other classes, but very stable and easy. Honestly, many times I was eating while I was playing this build. I just put a totem down and block, and then the totems do all the work for you. And if anything lives past the totems, you can just bone shatter them. It's so easy and casual. You can take on any boss. I fought the Act 2 boss with weapons that were half my level. Like all my gear was out of date. It didn't really matter. I was just chilling using totems because again, they have their own scaling on that. Obviously, I recommend keeping your gear up to date, but in general, I think this one was probably one of the simplest ones. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.